talk about what's happening with the Black church. And if you're not religious, this may be informative to you, even if it's not your thing. But I think it does show a change of the times. So there's an article that was published recently from the Griot, and they're talking about the decline of the Black church. Now, for those who are not aware, when we say the Black church, we're not just talking about just one particular Black church. We mean it like as a community, like the Black church, like all the Black churches together, right? Membership has declined. Attendance has declined. What could be the reason? With this particular church that is in Brooklyn, this is one of the ones that's mentioned. It says Brooklyn's Black church choirs persist amid attendance decline and gentrification. Where Brooklyn at? Where Brooklyn at? Where Brooklyn at? Okay, here we go. Many church choirs in the heart of Brooklyn keep singing despite boasting fewer singers than in the years past as neighborhoods face gentrification and organized religious affiliation decreases. In 1847, it was founded in 1847, Concord Baptist Church in Brooklyn's oldest historically Black congregation. At the time, a nearby neighborhood known as Weeksville, now considered part of central Brooklyn, was the second largest free Black community in the United States before the Civil War. That's coming from Amanda Henderson, who collections historian at the Weeksville Heritage Center. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for everybody. Louise Nelson, a Brooklyn native and church historian of the Berean Baptist Church in Crown Heights, said music was the foundation of the early church, and that remains true for churches in the borough today. The songs uplifted us, kept us going, yada, yada. But according to Pew Research Center data, between 2019 and 2023, Black Protestant monthly church attendance fell from 61% to 46%. That's the largest decline among major U.S. religious groups. Of course, the pandemic accelerated this trend, and its impact is visible in thinning choir stands. So yeah, when the pandemic happened, one of the first things people stopped doing was going to church, right? Because that is one of those crowded spaces where you're around more people. So that was something that did stop. Some churches were offering services like online, so you could attend virtually, etc. But here's the thing, folks. Okay, there's a couple of things going on here. Let's start with the first one, which is gentrification. These neighborhoods have changed. This is not the Brooklyn of the 1950s, the 60s, the 70s, hell, even the 80s, even the 90s. People have been pushed out, or people have decided to move out. What do I mean by that? The Black population in New York City, and in particular, the Black American population in New York City, has continued to decline. Hell, when I was in undergrad, that was something I noticed. When I was in college, there were a lot of people from New York. There are a lot of people from New York and New Jersey. And I went to college at the University of South Carolina. There are a lot of you guys. And ultimately, what I noticed as well, some of those people that came from New York and came from New Jersey, when they graduated college, instead of moving back home, they decided to stay down south and they got jobs there, whether it was in Charlotte, like North Carolina, or Charleston, etc. They decided to stay there because the cost of living was cheaper. And they're like, well, hell, I can work here a couple of years and then save up and buy a home. There's that. Then there is people being pushed out, right? So Brooklyn is very gentrified now. It didn't look like that when I lived there, but it's very gentrified now. Williamsburg has changed. I see there's gentrification happening in Flatbush, over in that area. Like there's a lot of gentrification. So when that happens, the rent increases and everything else goes up too. The moment you see a Whole Foods or a juice bar, run. I say this jokingly, but it's true. You know what's coming. You know what's coming. So people who grew up in those neighborhoods can't afford to live there anymore. So they're either priced out because the landlords increase the rent because, hey, we got the tech people moving in and they're going to pay us $3,000 a month. So you got to go. That's one of the ways they're pushed out. or they're pushed out because they just can't afford anything else in the neighborhood anymore. The local grocery store is gone. Now, as if you want to buy groceries, you got to go to Whole Foods. Not everybody can afford to shop at Whole Foods. The point being is this: the Black population in New York City has continued to decline. Now, it's not unique to New York City, but it's been happening. That's part of this. And then we'll get to the part about younger Black people, because there's something here about religion altogether. It's not just the gentrification. They go on to say here, according to the research published, it says that Black Protestants attended church on Zoom more than other denominations during the pandemic, and they have been the slowest to return to in-person worship. The internet has taken over and streaming has taken over. People don't go to the building as much as they are streaming it. Goes on to say here that when in-person services first resumed, it took a long time for the choir to rebuild because many members were still staying home for health reasons. Recently, though, he's seen more people showing up. Goes on to say here, it says a typical service attracts approximately 150 people and roughly 100 virtually. Over time, Berene's choirs have consolidated into a single mass choir with approximately 20 singers. So let's talk about this as well. You know, I grew up in the church. I've talked about that before on this show. And it was very different when I was growing up. Sunday was packed. And if you were raised in a family like mine, you probably had to go to Bible study on Wednesday too. But Sunday was packed, and there were two services. There was the early morning service, and then there was the kind of mid-morning service that ended was supposed to end at lunchtime, but it didn't. It was supposed to end at lunchtime, but it didn't. Those services were long, and you could feel your tummy like growling during the service. And all I could think about is when the pastor would say, look to your neighbor and say, neighbor, you all right. You all right. I would just think to myself, I wanted to look to my neighbor and say, neighbor, I am hungry. Those were long services, right? But things have changed. You know, that was a long time ago. And I remember there were choir competitions, different churches would come together. There were church conventions, and you would have this choir, that choir, and they would have a choir, the sister act, it was real. That was a real thing. That is not the case so much anymore. Particularly here in the Brooklyn area there. The South is more so the Bible Belt. So in the South, there's churches everywhere, right? But part of the reason why they're seeing that decline is also because of younger people. Younger people, younger Black people in particular, are less likely to be religious. They're less likely to attend church service every Sunday. Times have greatly changed, right? They're also less likely to buy into the two-party system. And I'm going to show you a connection with that as well. Younger people, in particular, younger Black people, tend to be a little bit more resourceful. We're talking about millennials, Gen Z, the internet age. I'm a millennial. So we had the internet. I had a little bit later, but we had the internet. Gen Z grew up with internet from birth, basically. They are more likely to seek out information for themselves. They are more likely to say, oh, well, the pastor said this in church. Let me look into this. They're more resourceful. I noticed this when I advised the students at the university. They were like this too. I really didn't have to guide them as much as you would think because they're so resourceful. They grew up with the internet, with social media. They know how to get around. They know how to find places, right? They also know how to find truth. And what some of the younger people have been finding is that some of the things that the pastors have been preaching in these churches doesn't really match what they've been finding through their own research. Some of the sermons are outdated. If you are one of these churches and you are still preaching this message of Israel, probably not a good time for you right now. And as we see, younger people are more likely to reject what Israel is doing. People are starting to sit back and put two and two together. I was talking to my sister, my sister's younger than me. I was talking to my sister about this earlier today. My sister also said, why do I need to be a part of a religion that was brought on by colonizers? Whoa. I was like, whoa, they are younger, but they are very resourceful. They have done their homework. When I was a kid, we didn't have social media, right? Those things came later. So they're just not willing to put up with, I guess, like some of the things that my generation put up with. And you'll see that here in this particular study. They talked about this in 2022. A study shows that Black Americans are less connected to the Black church. Young Black Americans. This is the picture that I had of the guy earlier. Those days are gone. Like, you don't see those kind of days anymore. Like, I remember my grandma was on the choir. They all had those robes, like the robes that you see here in the picture. And it was a big, like a big to-do. But for younger Black people, this is not necessarily the case. It says here that throughout history, the Black church has been so much more than just a place of worship. For centuries, it has been a source of inspiration, hope, especially during the vile days of American slavery. But that sentiment doesn't seem to connect with younger Black Americans as it did with their elders. In another Pew Research study, young Black adults are less religious and less engaged in Black churches than older generations. Black millennials and Zoomers, Gen Z, pray less, are less likely to have grown up in a Black church, and are less likely to say religion plays an important role in their lives. They also attend fewer religious services, and those who do are less likely to go to a predominantly Black church. This is very interesting. It goes on to say here, 63% of Black Americans who participated in the study said that if they were looking for a new congregation, it was not too important or not at all important for them to find a congregation where most other attendees shared their race. This is interesting. Finding a congregation that is welcoming and that offers inspiring sermons was deemed a higher priority. They don't want to hear gloom and doom and you're going to hell. They don't want to hear that. They want to be able to walk into a place where they will be accepted as they are. They got enough going on out here in these streets. They don't want to hear that. And a lot of us grew up with that. If you do this, you're going to hell. If you do that, you're going to, you know what I mean? Have people afraid to breathe. But they're not willing to put up with that. We also see the study also found that 3/4 of Black adults surveyed said that Black churches have played at least some role in helping Black people move towards equality, including 3 in 10 who say Black churches have done a great deal. So there isn't one main reason why younger Black Americans are skipping out on some places of worship, but times are different. And what the church meant for Black people 100 years ago doesn't mean the same thing anymore. Yeah. Also, churches used to be more involved in the community. Nowadays you look around and you got these millionaire pastors who have these mega churches, Cleflo Dollar, TD Jakes. You see that. Joel Osteen, you ain't Black, but you up there too. So anytime we look around, we see like you got a private jet. That's the image that is more represented now. The other one here, Veronica, yes, you brought this up as well. Misogyny is why many young Black women are skipping church. That's another reason. That's another reason where some, especially younger Black women, don't want to be told that you got to listen. I went to a Baptist church. I went to a Methodist church. I went to a Pentecostal church. At the Pentecostal church, and I told you guys about this briefly, I think on call-in before. At the Pentecostal church, we weren't allowed to wear pants. We couldn't have, jewelry. We weren't supposed to cut our hair. We couldn't wear makeup. But the guys didn't have those. The guys could wear what they wanted. It was just, it seemed like a lot of the restrictions were on the women. So a lot of people today, the younger people, they not willing to deal with that. There's like, yeah, no, I'm good. So that's a big part of it as well. And then there's the politics of it all. And this is what I think people really need to see. Let me go ahead and put this up here. Has the Black church lost credibility by becoming Democratic Party surrogates? Black preachers told their members to support abortion. He says sex changes, drag queen story time, boys entering girl sports, and to vote like Black women. How much blame does the Black church hold for Kamala Harris's poor election results? Now, for me, I'm not looking at Black teachers told their members to support blah, 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 because that actually has not been what I saw in the Black church. But what I will say, we play this video, is the way that the Black church kind of, sucked up to the politicians and said, support this person. The fact that Joe Biden could just enter a Black church, and not have to apologize for any of the things he said about Black people. Same goes for Donald Trump when he walked up into the Black church. This whole idea that the Black church tells you this is who you're supposed to vote for, so you better vote for them. Why? And some of the younger people ain't really feeling that. As you'll see in this previous presidential election in 2024, younger Black people didn't come out like they did in 2020. What does that say? So this is another one, and people need to ask, when you see the politicians walk into the Black church and like, hey, they kind of knew this is the place that we're supposed to go to get your vote. But now that the younger Black peeps are not there as much like it was back in my day, I said back in my day, when I was like growing up, they still miss out on the Black youth vote. They still trying to cozy up to, and no offense anybody here, but they still trying to cozy up to the ladies in the church hats, like the woman on this screen. They still trying to cozy up to them, the older generation of Black voters. And there's a whole generation of Black potential voters that they completely overlook. This is the buffoonery, some of the buffoonery that the Black church has allowed us to deal with. All praise, glory, all praise, glory. Come on, the power of the Lord is here. Weeping may endure. Why? Why did we put up with this? So you see, this is what I'm saying. This is where some of this comes from. He don't know why he there. People just know he there. Let me just show up. I don't really have to do anything for the Black community, but let me just show up at the church where a lot of the Black people are, and everything will just be pushed forward. Why did this happen? Why was this allowed to happen? Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. I have to mute this part because of the music. And so that's how he's able to slide right in there and win, right? Why? Why does this happen? And you got Jamal Bryant and all this. I don't have to do anything for the Black community. All I have to do is show up. That's it. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you guys, but things are changing. This is a different generation. When I say turn down for what, again, people, you got to pay attention to the younger people. You got to pay attention to the Gen Z group. You know, a lot of times I think people wash their hands of them. Listen, I'm a millennial. And when I was growing up, they said that my generation was doomed. That's what they told us. When I was in high school, they told us that. They said, yeah, you guys are going nowhere. Best bet you have is to go to college so you have some hope of being successful. Otherwise, other than you guys have, you're going nowhere. That's what they told us. So pay attention to the young people and reach out to them and see what's up. But community is changing. And where it was once a place where people would organize and gather together with at the Black church as one of the best examples, those things are changing. Got to talk to the kids, man. You got to pay attention and ask people how they're feeling, what's going on and all that kind of stuff. But honestly, I think that outdated rhetoric that is being preached at some of these churches, the younger people, they're not going to be for that, man. They're not going to be for that. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.